John. I promised already I wouldn't read this, but there's just so much in here. You know, it's interesting. I also promised Tom that I would keep his resume to things that happened in the last decade, because if I didn't, his distinguished resume would take us quite a while. But anyway, welcome again. And as John mentioned, this is the 25th of these lectures, and we're delighted to have Thom join us tonight. Thom Mayne, FIA, is the founder of Morphosis, an interdisciplinary and experimental practice based in Los Angeles. He got his Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Southern California in 1968 and a Master of Architecture from Harvard in 1978. Throughout his career, he's also been an educator. He was a co-founder, as you know, of SCI-Arc, the Southern California Institute of Architecture, and he's a tenured professor at the UCLA School of Arts and Architecture. He's taught at Columbia, the Berlage Institute in the Netherlands, the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, Yale, and the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Morphosis' recent award-winning projects include the wonderful San Francisco Federal Building, the Wayne L. Morse United States Courthouse in Eugene, Oregon, the University of Cincinnati Student Recreation Center, the Hypo Albe Adria Bank in Udine, Italy, and the Madrid Public Housing Project. I'm sure many of these you'll see tonight. Projects that are currently under construction or on the boards are the Fair Tower in Paris, France, Museum of Nature and Science in Dallas, and a new academic building for Cooper Union in New York. Obviously, Morphosis' work can be seen around the world, and it has every scale from the individual building to urban design projects at large scale. Some of Tom's recent honors include the Pritzker Prize in 2005, the McDowell Medal in 2008, the 2006 National Design Award from the Cooper Hewitt Museum. He's the Alumni of the Year Award from USC, I think that's 2005. The 2000 American Institute of Architects Los Angeles Gold Medal in Architecture. He's also a fellow of the American Academy of Rome and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. With Morphosis, Thom Mayne has been the recipient of over 20 Progressive Architecture Awards, over 70 American Institute of Architecture Awards, and numerous other recognitions. Under Tom's direction, the firm has been the subject of various group and solo exhibitions throughout the world, including a large solo show at the Centre Pompidou in Paris in 2006, the Contemporary Art Institute in Cincinnati, the Walker Arts Institute in Minneapolis, and a major retrospective at the Netherlands Institute in 1999. Morphosis' buildings and projects have been published extensively. The firm has been the subject of more than 20 monographs, and one of which you can see tonight, from publishers all around the world. It's an honor to welcome Thom Mayne to Philadelphia and to our distinguished list of lecturers. Tom?
Let me get this thing set up here. Terrific. Thank you so much. It's funny, I tend to put ideas together literally a few minutes before these things, because I'm never quite sure. Am I okay? The kind of what I want to address, because architecture is so immensely broad, and your positions are shifting in terms of the focus of your work. But tonight, I've decided to talk about the three kind of territories that I've been exploring for the last 25 years that form the basis of the work. But just before that, I would like to say, and it's going to be easily understandable for you in Philadelphia, because the work is clearly kind of indigenous to a place like this. There's certain broad ideas that have propelled me since really my academic career. And I have to say, it's kind of fascinating. This is the 25th event for Lucan. I put up, it's my 175th work in progress, which means it's my default lecture, meaning I'm just going to discuss whatever I feel like talking about. And I'm actually of the generation which left Mr. Kahn and Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe and Aalto, particularly those four people. And that when I was in school in the late 60s, there were changes taking place on both political and cultural levels that were absolutely fundamental to my outlook in life and have formed me at that point. And I'm talking about a young man between 18 and 23 or whatever. And what took place simply was that architecture was about to depart from its more internal structure, architects looking at other architects, and generational information moving from one to the next. And with that, certain monumental figures which absolutely dominated that intellectual and creative discourse, of which, of course, Lou Kahn was one of the major. And what we were looking at the time, besides the fact of dealing with our own lives, i.e. Vietnam, the desegregation, the radical kind of shift in politics at the time, and culturally, an explosion of film. And all of you that are close to, whoa, is that okay? I lost you. I guess you didn't lose me. And of course, it's Truffaut and Godard and Antonioni. We could go on and on. Could you actually leave those lights on, whoever turned them off? It was very nice. I like actually not having pure blackness. Yeah, they could be a medium if it's possible. It's nice to actually see you're talking to. And there was a shift, and it moved kind of outside the realm. And then with that came certain, and of course, literature. And it was Calvino, and we could go on and on. And there were certain things that preoccupied me, and it started with conflict. And I became just fascinated with conflict on a political level and on a personal level. It had to do with my family, it had to do with the world I live in, it had to do with my observation of where we were at this time in history. And in some ways, all of the work I've done is some sort of a meditation between willfulness and chance. If I had to say one sentence, I would go, I'm done. That's what I've been interested in. And then with that, understanding architecture is an original act. It's singular, it's purposeful, and it's purposeful in a provisional sense. There are no fixed rules. There is nothing transcendent, although that to be a larger, probably philosophical question. And it's not a priori. And again, I'm saying this, and I'm not, several people wanted me to rile you up. It's funny, there's always certain people here, they go, Tom, you got to really push these guys. And, but it's actually very much connected to Lou Kahn, in that of the figures that I mentioned, he would be the person that I was probably rebelling against in terms of a prioriness, a thing appearing prior to its initiation as an idea to the building. And again, partly from a generational stance and partly between a huge shift in the operational strategies that would start with maybe Jackson Pollock, which would have to do with the autogenerative, and I'm not sure that's a word that's used. Autogeneration, you're working on the method that produces something versus the thing, and it was part of, again, my generation, and literally all the work has to do with an attack on the a priori, on the notion of you're working within a system of inventing a building, and that process takes you someplace parallel to scientific invention. And it begins with quite a huge amount of insecurity. I'm an immensely insecure person. I have no claim that I know anything. It's based on hunches. It's based on initial questions. It's based on a commitment to investigation and a commitment to probing and innovation, because that's finally who we are as a profession. We deal in intellectual and creative capital. You only have to look at other design areas like the automobile industry and see what takes place when they're not attentive to the demands of that kind of idea, having to do with transportation in this case. And all of this had to do with the notion that the structure which we work within, meaning the philosophical, the idea underpinnings of our work, is provisional. It's continually evolving, changing, and moving, and one has to be attentive to those changes to stay relevant. And I would say it is an enormous problem as an architect, as an American architect working in this country, that I've grown in the last 20 years to see myself and to differentiate myself as an American architect, and that's not a good thing. As I look at my friends, whether they're in Japan or whether they're through Europe, that we work with much more constrained kind of territory in terms of the demands that are put upon us. Tonight, I'm going to show, I'm going to first talk about kind of three areas of interest, which are the underpinnings of the work. And one deals with making and materiality, one deals with landscape, and it's going to move towards a broader idea of ecology, and one has to do with ideas of organization, because basically that's what we do. We make things coherent, we organize complicated, complex strata of information, and then that notion is going to move towards an idea of the urban. I purposely, it's something we're talking about in the office right now. I've gone through kind of a very rapid transition in the last 10, 12 years from very small scale work to larger scale work. And at this moment of time, we're very much thinking about the shift that's taking place as the scale changes and the type of client changes, and that we were, I think, known very early on for being somewhat rigorous or somewhat activist, let's say, in terms of taking responsibility of our own artistic inventions. And it became clear to me as a young California architect. I started Morphosis in 1972. I was just barely 28 years old, only worked for a couple offices, and it became clear to me working those offices that they were not capable of maintaining the integrity of their own ideas, and it had to do with the power of both the economic structure we work in, the particular capital structure we work within, and it had a huge amount to do with the nature of the construction industry. And no offense to anybody out in the construction industry, but they just basically couldn't do it, and they were not interested. And there was a very little kind of capability in aligning our values, let's say, as architects. Right? It's changed now, because I'm going to come back and say quite the reverse, because I think now there's a coming together of the way we build, the way we think, and the way we design, which is extremely useful, and which is the future of both architecture and construction. These first projects were hugely influenced by Diderot. And of course, Diderot had this really phenomenal idea of, he wrote the encyclopedia of essentially objects, of things, of stuff, right? But his idea was that objects convey intelligence. And I became fascinated with this idea. And our first early work, the drawings, the work itself, was connected to the scale of work we could get. This was work 30 years ago. And we were completely invested in the making process and in the kind of invention and creativity that comes out of making versus the conceptual act of architecture. As we work with drawings, conceptual ideas, and it's a very, very different way of working. And again, it's something we're very actively talking about now. As we made these structures, they find their way into the various work. And as it proceeded over time, the single projects which were capable of dealing with smaller scale now became more intensifications of larger work, that we were investing this kind of energy. And then as this idea moved through, this notion of the process of invention of making a material started leading to ideas of architecture itself and started being conceptualized in terms, this is a design institute in Taipei, where this notion of materiality started leading to conceptual ideas, and then it expanded again, and it started dealing with surfaces instead of objects, and we started working with, this is a work with a graphic artist, Rebecca Mendez, and it's I should say, this is a big scale. This is 200 yards as a piece, and there it is partly as a building, and now we're moving in another direction. We're 20 years later than the first slide I showed you, and we're realizing that material has now changed and is dematerializing, and we're now using ideas that literally attack the material. They're cinematographic. They're images that start challenging the notion of the kind of the singularity of a 19th century idea of material. And then it started talking about the range of materials that were moved from opacity to transparency and translucency, and it started leading us to layering. And with the layering, something extremely dynamic as the light touches it. You're getting these continual changes of your observation of the thing, which is literally dematerializing and evolving over time. And you're no longer able to locate even the surface. It's getting more and more ambiguous, and of course that ambiguity is an interest of ours conceptually. And then again in our Caltrans building, as it becomes a part of the iconic fabric of this building. And then recently, 7 years ago, it became even more kind of fundamental to the building as we started looking at the nature of these surfaces and the nature of the material of these surfaces as they became part of the iconographic nature of the courthouse and the symbol of the court. This is a fragment of the Constitution and pieces of the Bill of Rights that was going to literally make up the skin of the building. That became this. Finally, the letters got off, and that's a whole nother conversation that we kind of lost that fight, but it turned into this. And this notion now is the material is participating with a broader conceptual idea of the work, which has to do with the connectivity of the system of law and the relationship of the 6 courthouses that make up this complex, and that already start revealing the singularity of the courthouse. So as you read the exterior, you finally come to understand it as you occupy the courthouse itself, and it's no longer this completely abstract idea, but it's actually located within the culture and the symbol of the court, and the symbol of the court historically, as it makes references. Well, in 1980, my first little project was a 2468 house, and we had this idea of kind of rethinking how it was made, and instead of doing drawings, we took every piece apart, and we talked about an assembly process, and it was the marking of our commitment to taking responsibility of the construction of our own inventions. And 35 years later, 30 years later, whatever, this is how we work. And this is a structural model of a project we're building in Shanghai. And from here to here is a half a kilometer. It's 500 meters. And we invented something, and then we take the responsibility for making it, and we make it piece by piece, exactly like that drawing I showed you of that little 20 by 20 square foot room house. And it's integrative. Every piece connects to every other part, and that's what it looked like a couple months ago. And you're looking at a piece of it that's now, I think this is about 300 meters, something like that. And then here it is, we're just studying and finding kind of final resolves to big pieces. This is a campus in Shanghai, and it's a fragment of a city, you might say. And there is the result. And again, I'm talking to architects. I just did this in a museum in La Jolla, and it didn't mean as much if you're looking at lay people. But I show this to my architectural friends, and they get it because it's bloody complex. And this is built in Shanghai, happens to be with an extremely interesting subcontractor. But it's, and here we are again, kind of working on pieces of a theater and a gallery and the various components. And there you get an idea of the scale of this piece. And again, each of these pieces comes out of our office. And what's taking place, of course, right now is that design and making are singular. When I walk around a desk, one of my young people, I'm looking at it, I ask what it is, and it's just, it's neutral. It's a line. It can't be anymore. You look at it, and it's something, right? It has a reality to it. And it's really fascinating, because what's taking place is you're literally building virtually, right? So your thinking, your conceptual thinking, and your thinking of the reality are singular. Okay, that was area 1. Area 2, landscape. Again, 25 years ago, a friend of mine took me out to Double Negative, Michael Heiser in Nevada, and it just, it changed me forever. He's digging, he's cutting, And, well, I was kind of ready for it because I was very interested in with Pichler's work in Austria, and Pichler was the kind of the John Hayek of that country and had huge influence on people like Raymond Abraham and Wolf Prix and Gunther Dobenek and Hans Hollein. And he was a digger. And I was already kind of thinking about this notion of this very primitive kind of notion of digging the earth and occupying the earth versus building it. And immediately it had effect on our drawings and models. And as we received a commission for a residence up in Santa Barbara, we were starting to scratch and mark the earth, and we were connected to these various groups of earth artists as a very different idea. And then right after that, got a piece of work in Japan, in Chiba, Japan, and started working on this idea of a project that would hold the site, and the main piece is a wall and a series of light hoods that support the building, which is now part of the earth, and kind of an entryway that's part of that sequence. And then one object that has the conventional notion of view and sight that represents the conventional piece. And then right after that, another 5 years later, we got a commission to do a high school in the east part of Los Angeles with this extremely kind of unusual superintendent of schools, which was allowing us to do something that was just unheard of at the time. And this was our first, what is it, a dwaddle, part model, part drawing, part computer image. And it's now land augmentation, and it goes back to Heiser. We're no longer building buildings, we're shaping the earth, right? And it doesn't quite turn out that way, but we'll keep talking about it. And so here it is, after it's withstood kind of programmatic initiatives and structure, et cetera, is it becoming kind of the reality of the program, and then there it is built. And of course, our larger goal in this project was to initiate thinking and inquisitiveness. And we saw architecture, and we saw the act of architecture as being fundamental to education. That we weren't interested in housing or supplying the physical edifice for a program. We were interested in being a very activist role in that program, and we were demanding that the children, the high school children, whatever, the young people in this campus, that it absolutely demanded some sort of inquiry. They would have to somehow rethink the nature of what architecture was and what a school was. And then that started having an effect on a huge amount of our work. This is the building in Klagenfurt. And now, 60% of the work is kind of reshaping the earth surface, and then out of that escapes another kind of active surface and a piece of typology versus morphology. And there it is right after, or just about being completed. And again, this is that surface, and then it finally kind of lifts up and starts interacting with the more conventional pieces. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then another project where the building is now being kind of informed by the landscape. This is again the Hoopa Bank in Udine, Italy. And the land now is completely augmented. It takes in most of the social functions of the project and is active. And now we're starting to include infrastructure. Roadway, landscape, building are all seen as singular. And the building is actually a component of infrastructure. And then what came out of this is a new condition. You're occupying this space between real ground and augmented ground, or a series of augmented grounds, however you want to talk about it. And you occupy this interstitial space, and that gives all kinds of possibilities that allow for orientation and for the views of the connectivity of the various pieces, which I'm going to come to when I talk about organization. And then again, in Shanghai, a building now which is mostly landscape. In this case, it's literal landscape. It's about 7 acres of plant material. And then winding through that is kind of one singular building that kind of moves out over a lake. And again, the scale of this thing is just huge. This is 50 meters, 150 feet. It's moving over the water. And then again, the building is now starting to de-evolve. There's no object, there's no thing left. It's all now completely integrated with its site. And again, this is what it looked like a couple months ago. And again, this surface is all landscape material. And again, this stuff, all landscape. Ditto. Whole field. You're moving across a highway, actually, and it's going to continue another couple hundred meters. And then on the other side, it just started. This is all landscape. It's going to come up through here, and there's a bridge that takes you through to the hotel, and it's literally, it's a small town. And then the spaces, again, that are produced under that fabric. What's that? Wow, do you notice how loud that helicopter is in here? Huh. You think you have much better acoustics with the brick and all that, wouldn't you? And there's going to be a whole organization in terms of kind of how we've kind of manipulated this ground surface. Okay, last, I'm still on the, I've got 22 minutes. I'm on the introduction, all right? This is the third piece, and it's the most complex piece. And it's going to start with fragment, but maybe it would be better understood by saying it's, instead of fragment, and it's, there's been so much kind of hype on fragment with deconstruction. I'm much more interested in fragment as incompleteness. It's leading to future construction, very different idea. And it's going to lead to an organizational idea, and that in turn is going to start leading to ideas of urbanism and how our work participates. And early on, I'm sure you're all the same. I think a lot of times when you make your most interesting discoveries, you have no idea what you're doing, and the more you understand them, it's probably not useful. That it's really a complicated notion of understanding, meaning making conscious and being able to verbalize an idea. And when we were doing this house, this is the Venice 3 house, and I was again just barely 30, and it started breaking apart, and it started relating to the site, and it was starting to articulate a series of pieces. And then just after that, we did this other commission that never got built. And then out of that, we built a part of it, and we were looking at kind of an area of an intensification. So like all of you, again, you look at a work, and unless you have an endless budget or kind of an unusual condition, which is probably not even healthy, you're looking for the territory where the architecture is going to reside, right? And it's very unusual that it's the whole thing, right? There's going to be places that are much more neutral, and there's places that have that kind of area of intensification. And when we did this, we were looking at this vertical space, and as we finished the model and we photographed it, and I was looking at this, I realized that this fragment was much more interesting than that. And it had, again, kind of an influence on where we were going to go from there. And we started realizing what we wanted to do is build things incomplete. And immediately, I designed what was going to become my own house, the 6th Street house, and it was made up of 10 pieces of discarded technology and made up a very different idea of coherency by association versus geometry. And then right after that, we were working on a series of projects, all of which started talking about a language of elements which were all connected, but each one of them had its own source, and they were in relationship to one another. And then what took place here is that we became much clearer that we were less interested in the object than we were in the relationship between things. Again, enormous, because I think architecture, huge amount of architecture is interested in the object, in the thing. And I early on became much more interested in the relationship between things and not the thing itself. And in fact, you could say we were disrupting even a reading of a possibility of some sort of singularity. And then that led to a series of projects. The Blades House, which again is made up of now 4 or 5 different structures. I'm talking about conceptual structures. And all of them are remain or are constructed as partialities that are left to be complete. And for me, it very much connects to time and dealing with the 4th dimension that alludes to that dimension over time. And then again, the elementary school at USC, the Hoopa building, as it was articulating the number of elements that made up this large complex, which again was a fragment of the city. And then there was another kind of parallel track to this, that was much more focused on the urban. And it started with the implication of urbanism with smaller projects and later moved into something more literal. Because this was done actually earlier, this is 1980, and it was a project for a residence. And again, instead of one thing, it was made up as a series of things that were connected to each other, and kind of this glue piece in here. And at the time, I think we were calling it village clutter, but we saw it as a model for urbanism. And again, the connections of I went to the GSD at Harvard in '68, and I came back, and I was completely messed up after going there for a year. And I'd become, I was inundated in Tendenza and Rossi and in Matthias Ungers, who was my professor. And so everything had that sense, and it took me not that long, 6-7 months to get rid of it. But I hadn't done it yet. And it's typology based, meaning it's in my terms a massively overinvested in history. I think personally the absolute major problem with architecture in this country, an absolute absurd overinvestment in history, and I'm saying that in Philadelphia. It does not matter. You live in the globe. You do not repeat this. This has its place in history, and it had its own kind of credibility within the broader forces that produce this, and it's absolutely absurd to think you can repeat it visually. First place, the vision might be not even the priority of architecture. There's a question about that it has haptic, it has much broader kind of meaning to us. And architects still, especially, I guess it's a disease in this country, much more in the world, and it's why we produce so few really good contemporary architects. Think about it. It's really bizarre if you look at the world. It's operating at a certain level, having to do with a certain kind of innovation. And it's an incredible kind of investment. Anyway, this kind of led us to a really broad idea of, this is a competition for the Gedenkbibliothek in Berlin, and all of a sudden now these pieces all have very particular urban roles. And the building now is a series of buildings that solves these various urban conditions. And whether it's the tradition of the access, whether it's a part of the old Berlin, whether it's the connective tissue and the new building to the old library, whether it's landscape, which is bringing in the social culture of the park, all of these pieces now have distinct roles within the urban, the broader urban problem. So when we get to our graduate housing project in Toronto, we're using this strategy, and we can isolate pieces, and whether they're kind of large and small, whether they open up and deal with scale, whether they have to do with this edge condition, which is forms the threshold and the gate to the campus, which was part of the competition. All of them are kind of specific. And again, in Los Angeles with the Caltrans building, where we can isolate roles of elements which are part of infrastructure, in this case a 100-meter long lamp, which is part of a connective tissue from Japantown to Frank Gehry's Disney Hall, whether it has to do with the signage and kind of playing with the historic condition of the site. It's 100 Main Street and 100 First Street, and this is the kind of the beginning of downtown Los Angeles. And again, these elements all contribute to a broader idea of the public relationship of the site, including the square, which is very kind of not Los Angeles, this public space, and the use of this sculpture by Quisionnet out of New York, which again is very large scale. It's over 100 meters long, and it literally activates the space, because we recognize for 10 years we know people here, that the space itself has to have a dynamicism to stay alive and to draw kind of attention. And then sometimes you can literally make little chunks of cities, and in this case, we had an idea of an organization which again is prioritizing the idiosyncratic of the city, not the organized pieces, but all the stuff that's found in between. I'm much more interested in the alleys and the mistakes that are made over time than I am the conscious, either the Cartesian or the classical kind of elements, which are just obvious. And we're trying to capture that, and we're trying to kind of invent a new typology. So here's the housing block, which is typical of Madrid, and we're breaking it down purposely, and we're trying to attack the institutional nature of housing, which is seems to be agreed upon is not useful, And we're trying to find a structure which is more porous, which allows kind of the cellular nature of a house, light, air, view, etc. And it ended up with this, same density, same budget. This is a great project, by the way, that I wish there were projects like this in the States. This is $60 a square foot. And of course, social housing is over 60% of Spain lives in social housing, probably it averages close to 50% of all of Europe. And it's not stigmatized like it is in this country, or it's less stigmatized, let's say, or they have their own problems. And so here it is in this kind of odd kind of place, and they ask architects from various places in the world to kind of experiment with these, and we got this very large site and came up with a very, very different idea, which was prioritizing the residential, the living nature and the kind of human nature of this versus kind of an office structure or kind of a reused kind of block that makes much more sense for a commercial building than it does for housing, including a scale that belonged to the street and that belonged to a more domestic environment within, in this case, the outskirts of Madrid, and then making out of that a series of courtyards and spaces which develop the social nature of this environment, and one that was trying to expand on the community and collective kind of relationship of our housing developments. You know, I didn't say, all this top stuff is landscape. If it looks really tough, these are all arbors. Landscape was absolutely a major part of this. And then finally, we're working off of multiple systems versus single systems, and this is key to everything I'm going to show you, because I can build something. And I should say here that one of the changes that also took place, that starts with Morphosis, the name, is that I've seen architecture as a collective act, not a personal act. I have absolutely no interest in architecture as a singular artistic act that leads back to a singular person. I actually find it quite destructive and quite uninteresting. And architecture, and it's of course ramping up, it's scaling up right now as the projects get larger, more complex, etc., is a collective act. It really always has been to some degree. And it needs leadership, and it needs focus, it needs direction, there's no question about that. And I'm interested in working in ways that are not compositional or private, but that are public and discursive. So when I'm working with this thing, we can work with these various systems, and this project is worked collectively, and I can talk about that piece that you've seen that was constructed. I can talk about the land element, and I can talk about various pieces in connection with each other as they produce complicated, complex, large-scale organizations. Because again, I'm building under a single act, under a single office, a very large part of a city. And I'm trying to appropriate techniques, methodologies, which are appropriate to the complexity of the problem. And again, my own critique of the profession, which drives me, is that we're not living up to an understanding of the methods we use that are capable of solving the types of problems that are given us today. And we radically oversimplify them. And then that turns into a conventional plan, and we can talk about that now in terms of libraries and auditorium spaces and exhibition spaces and administration and recreation, hotel, on and on, as it makes up this complex. Okay, and that's the, again, under construction. This is part of the landscape. We're way back to the furthest end of this thing, and we're looking at that piece you were looking at in earlier photographs. Okay, 3 projects in 20 minutes. If I did my job right, everything will be obvious. That the projects you look at, they're focused on maybe 3 different things. The first one is our project in the campus at Cincinnati, and it's going to be about connection at an urban level. The second one is going to be the San Francisco building, and it's going to be about something intricative. And the third one is our project at Far Tower, and it's about the meshing or the intersection of an icon client and performance. And again, I would think today, as we produce, especially at this moment of history, given our economic and political kind of issues that are prevalent, that we're looking for resolving, again, conflictual tensions. Because I'm asked often, can you even produce kind of strong architecture in this political time? And I'll let you answer it. Cincinnati, campus, you probably, Eisenman was here, and you probably had a group of people that showed projects. Interesting idea. They hired, quote, design architects. Kind of an odd idea, I have to say, meaning that there's not design architects or whatever. And they hired Peter Eisenman, and that was an interesting choice, because if you're going to hire somebody that's about a complicated character, you can imagine, and get through that one, you're going to be in good shape. And they were literally looking at architecture of increasing the status of the campus, which is a really kind of radical idea. And Frank Gary's got one up here, and Michael Graves is right there, and Cobb's over here, and on and on. And we got this kind of middle site, you'll see in a minute, right there. And huge project, largest on the campus. And the last one they did, they decided they didn't want any more icons. They want a connective tissue. And there's going to be a building right across of it by Moore Udell, and then the student association building is going to be worked on by Charlie Guathamy. And it's going to be about this nature of connecting, and they destroyed the whole kind of middle fabric, which was absolutely disruptive to an understanding of the campus. And we produce this complex, which is the edge of a football field, and you're going to move from the old campus square through to the new campus, and then across to the next square, which is the medical and scientific campus. And it's literally, there's no kind of object. Its purpose is only as part of a connective tissue, and all of the pieces are literally deriving their ideas from some existing condition. So there's no kind of traditional invention. All of it is responsive to some, it's interpretive of some found conditions. So you can see we use the football field and this incredible space from the campus and use that as kind of one of the main kind of connective tissues. And then kind of one of our landscape pieces kind of came through, which used the field. And then we put a part of a piece of symmetry. There's another one that's going to be built here in our plan. And we tipped our hat to Michael Graves and his interest in symmetry, and to the role of that building in terms of part of an entrance, and so on. And then again, very, very complex problem that starts with kind of an existing condition, and I can talk about various scale ideas, and whether it's the academic wing and the housing, or whether it's the structure that makes up the large part of the recreational facility, or whether it's the roof on top of that, and on and on. I can make up this complex and generate hugely complicated, kind of interdependent structures out of this, which has to do with the connection of these 5 very different uses. It was the first time they brought housing onto the campus. And during the process, we added the academic space, because again, the idea was to increase transparency, to increase interconnectedness with students, and in terms of living, recreation, and learning. And again, I won't bother you with, but I can take you through this thing. And it's what we're interested in is we're organizing complex data. I mean, it's as simple as that in some ways. And we're looking for methods to do that, and they're collected methods. And what we ended up with is this. And then, of course, we realized, like in the Hoopa Bank, that it's seasonal. So when it's snowing, it literally becomes ground, this piece, right? And it literally becomes part of the connective tissue. And this form itself, I can't draw on that, came directly from George Hargrave's kind of shaping of the site. And all of it was very much a dialogue with other buildings, other architects that were working in the periphery kind of area. So there's Michael at the edge right here, and this is this large kind of open field that's continuing, this kind of neutral space of the football field, and then the entry. And again, we're borrowing from Toronto. That part of the housing kind of spans over and becomes part of a threshold, kind of a gateway. And then we're looking at the street, which is going to end in the Student Union, and in front of that, of course, the old campus. And it's literally compressed. We wanted it much tighter. We couldn't convince them. But it's a piece of San Gimignano. It's whatever you want. It's absolutely, it's a walking street. It's a Hilltown street. It's a place for interaction, social interaction. And all of these elements come directly from, or interpreted from, found site conditions. And then the interactions produce, well, it goes back to willfulness and chance. It produces accidents that are purposeful. So that if you walk through this, you're going to find these spaces that are threshold spaces, that are spaces between things, and that come from the interaction of these elements, which come from the process. They weren't designed a priori. They come out of a broader kind of thinking of an organizational strategy that produces complicated things. And you can control and discriminate within that process. And then again, that system I was showing you, that we looked at various kind of elements, you can see them now as part of a continuity, that the lines, the skylights, all of them play a continuity so that there's a connection between every part of the campus, inside and outside. The building cuts into the ground, the pools are there. And if you could see the building, if you're walking, you'd recognize these elements. The series of lines are not just structure, but they're organizational elements that allow you to perceive this, to understand where you are and to negotiate within a complex environment. And sometimes they're idiosyncratic, and sometimes they're repetitive, and they're serial within more kind of normative means. Second project, our project in San Francisco for the GSA. This is really an interesting one because before we had won the competition, and before we even arrived, the newspapers were already, there was stuff happening about Morphosis, and bad boy Thom Mayne and a radical firm is going to come up and literally, do you talk like Bill Maher here? Can I say it, fuck up your city? I just said it. And so it was really fascinating because by this time we were becoming more strategic. And again, that's a really interesting conversation, and one that's starting to enter the university. And that I think today you have to think way outside of design in terms of just the physical design sense, and one has to think strategically. And when we started this, we decided we were going to talk about the workplace, its urban condition, and resource management, sustainability, and never talk about the physiognomic, the look of the building. And we went on and produced that. And it's a very, very performance-driven building. I'm finding that people have a hard time looking at it, which is a whole other subject. And maybe, do you guys ask questions after these things? Because I'm very aware some of our buildings are very kind of clumsy and ugly, and it might even come from my admiration of Jim Sterling, who I recognized very early on. I loved his buildings because they were so clumsy, and but they were just so him. And I'm interested in the Dubuffet idea that there's no such thing as beauty. Beauty is a cultural phenomenon. There's only something that's demands inquiry and that is engaging, and I'm interested in that idea. And so we get the skin, and it really doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It performs. It's the first tall building in the United States where we took out the air conditioning in all but the cabins, which is about 15% of the building. And it operates like a machine in the kind of true early modernist sense. And the back skin is the north face, and it guides in light, and it's thick, and it plays as a foil to the history of the city and to this lovely kind of contextual nature of San Francisco and kind of these industrial alleyways, which are so much part of it. And then, of course, the thick skin, we were fascinated with its perceptual role in terms of how it dealt with light and how the edges start disappearing in the light. And then a courtyard, which will become one of the connected pieces of the mission area. And then we put the cafe on the corner and took it out from the building so that the people actually have to come outside, join the community, and the community comes to them. And it's a connected tissue. And then, of course, more important, it opens up a space to observe the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the infamous Ninth, and a beautiful kind of restoration work that they just completed 2 years ago. But it opens up, which is probably the most important building in San Francisco, to the public and to the square. And then in this body, we put a park, a Vespato Park, which is so much part of San Francisco, but it's on the 9th floor, and it just immediately became kind of used. They have weddings and all kinds of events there. And you can see Mission Bay on one side, and you're looking back at the city on the other. And then we gave this 60 by 60 by 55-foot cube to Jim Terrell, and to do one of his pieces. And of course, this is one of these pieces that changes over time and light. And The San Francisco conditions are perfect because as the fog comes down, there's a place where the whole building disappears here, and it reflects into the cloud structure, and it's just absolutely amazing. You can see this from 4 kilometers south as you're coming into the city from the airport, and it's one of his most probably public pieces to date. And then you're going to look at pieces that, again, all talk about systematized things which are shown in an idiosyncratic way. So you'll get one column and one piece of light, et cetera, and it's the entry. And it's going to be entering this very, very grand space. It's a space that's about 70 feet tall, and it's openly nostalgic, openly optimistic to the WPA. We built this in the Bush administration, by the way. We were highly aware of it. And we wanted to build something that was just outrageously optimistic and that talked about the nature of the US of A in the most kind of honorific terms. And you're looking back at the courthouse. If you saw it, you'd realize that the material palette and the court are the same. They're basically, this is a synthesized granite we're using and concrete. By the way, this was built for $240 a square foot. Everything I've shown you is very, very modest budgets, and that had to do with the language to some degree, and even the toughness maybe is part of it. And another kind of longer conversation that people look at the aesthetic, but they don't look at the nature of how that aesthetic was arrived at, and I think that's extremely important. And now, again, we're working again with performance. You stop at 4 stops, skip stop, walk 1 up, walk 1 down. And these places, again, engender social activity. They attack the balkanizing nature of institutions such as this. And they become these, they're tea rooms, coffee rooms, meeting spaces where guests can come in or people meeting with the various departments. And they don't have to penetrate the privacy of those spaces. They can meet them in this middle zone. And then the movement going up and down. And then you remember the hoods coming out of the front of the building. As you move up, you literally move outside the surface and you're in the plaza on top of glass in the public space. And again, these are meeting spaces for the employees. And then again, this early somewhere we were looking at this idea of ground, which you've seen again in the work as the building now is part of the ground and sees itself as emerging from the ground. But what happened here, the city wanted this. They wanted a 4-story building to cover the site, and we said, no, you got to have the thing. And we just basically did that and left the site open and made this. This came straight from Europe. This was 55 feet, and there's no distance farther than 6.5 meters from the edge, and that's actually a standard in Europe, nothing to brag about. And then I keep telling people we took the air conditioning out. We really didn't take it out. We replaced it with a skin. And again, in this culture, you don't get any. You can't amortize anything, so we had to take 13 million out of this, and we put 13 million there. There's no backup. It doesn't have air conditioning. There's no way you can, right? You live with it the way it is. And this is the skin. And then again, as it's being worked in a material language, it had pretty much to be 50% fabric that takes out 50% of the light and allows you to see through it. And it moves through hydraulics, which this is already our 3rd building. The Caltrans did it. The building in the Hoopa Bank did it. And then the backside. And again, you see a little piece of the Terrell just kind of peeking through of that void. And then this thick skin that guides air and also is used for access to window cleaning and servicing, et cetera. And then the plans. And what we did now, and again, we're working with office culture, and the most kind of radical act, really, they're used to working with these huge floor plates with management there, windows, and then you know that people are important when they occupy those places. Ooh, I just drew Kahn's library. Damn. And because the air flows through, and the cabins are low, the management is in the middle, where it should be. And of course, you can read Harvard MBA reports, and they tell you that in any modern thinking that they want management in a centralized location. They don't want them playing their computer games or whatever they do on the outside. And that was a year conversation. That was a tough one, because we're moving basically our clients and the the structure of that. And then this is, you're looking through the screen, that same screen. You're looking through that 50% screen, and you're looking at the cosine curve of the concrete. And again, the air is moving through. At night, it cools off the concrete, it radiates, you know, the whole passive thing. And it looks incredibly simple. We worked with Lawrence Berkeley Labs and Over-Air Engineering for over 2 years to make this thing work. And then that was the result. You can see the difference of, and you can see most of it is in cooling as it's coming down from an average building to our building. And then the delta was, I don't know if it's significant or not, it can power 600 homes, kind of a single building. So if 10 of these would power 6,000, which would be a community of about 20,000 people. And then again with the CO2, the same thing. And again, we're very, very interested in the performance. And again, when one of the people I had to present this to was Nancy Pelosi, and she doesn't like the building. She would like, she wanted a fake old building. She wanted, and we talked about this, and it was the only way to talk about it. It's not about what it looks like, it's how it performs. And we knew from the very beginning that we would be in alignment in terms of values politically with our client, meaning San Francisco and our immediate client. It was very, very useful. And then finally, just really quickly, we won a competition a year and a half ago to build the FAR tower in La Défense, and they were connecting it literally to the Eiffel Tower. It's a couple centimeters shorter, and it's, of course, at the edge of Paris proper. This is La Défense. This is the boundary of La Défense, and if you remember the highway, we're right at the edge of the highway, and you're going to see it, how it cuts off. We're right connected to Nervi's, Knit, the entry portal. This is the arch, the second arch, right? This is the LA. This is the metro and RER stop that brings in, I'm not good with numbers, over 500,000 people a day. And this is the scale of the project in its context. And this is, represents how we work in a reiterative form. We put an idea out that addresses certain problems, and then we challenge that. It's Popper's false solution, and we work through that reiterative process with our team to arrive at a solution. And where we're interested here is, again, developing something that was urbanistic, and we were using the idiosyncratic nature of the site to develop continuity and to re-glue the site together. And of course, all of you know that La Défense is used as an example of the absolute worst of 60s planning, and we're trying to kind of make corrective maneuvers on the ground, and it's actually going to be seen as a kind of a multiplicity of buildings, and we're trying to break the singularity of the tower as an extruded act. So as you look at it, it keeps evolving into something else as you move around the building from different positions, and then you're going to see that it's actually kind of a low pavilion, which I'll talk about in a minute, a medium-sized building, which is actually the height of the most of the context, and then this kind of off-centered, kind of leading Tatlin-like kind of structure of the tower. And then again, as we're moving through that, and then as it gets cut by the freeway, it literally just slices the back off, and it becomes something very, very different. And then again from the backside. And then a plan which represents a huge complexity, which you can't tell on this. There's an LA cut through the middle, so that, let me say, yeah, there it is. In the site, this is Courbevoie over here, and this is Puteaux. There's a boundary right here. There's a university here, and this LA is part of the building, a part of the urban plan. It goes up 30 meters, a little over 100 feet. And so it cuts the middle of the building, so it's this fantastic site. I remember we did the competition. There was a huge amount of competition. The number of architects, there were 10 of them. And I had calls from several of my friends going, Tom, this is a Morphosis site, you're going to love it. Meaning, it was a site that was just loaded with kind of complexity, starting that it didn't have a center. And it had to come down on kind of three things, as three legs to get to the ground. And then as it moves up, it evolves and it changes. Every floor is different. And you're looking from the lower to the upper level. It's actually the tallest building in Europe at this point. And then, again, it's interested in the connective tissue. It's going to be part of the Knit. And again, if you know that, that's Nervi with the beautiful, beautiful 6-inch concrete. It's just an amazing kind of piece. And they're going to come, I think I have a slide of that, how they get in there. And then, again, it's not a single building, but it's a multiplicity of buildings. It's kind of low building on both sides, kind of an entry pavilion and the tower itself. and then the connection to the Connect. You're going to come into the pavilion and kind of up to this 20-story high entry space, and then the basic kind of notion of how one works from the 10,000 K come in an hour and 15 minutes, and they're coming through the Connect building and then through our pavilion up the 30 meters, and then the elevators start at the lobby level, which is I think 35 meters in the air. You can already see Paris. You're looking down the Champs-Élysées. And then again, this kind of very unusual kind of structure where the elevators are kind of suspended in this upper space. And then looking at working on the pavilion itself and this series of escalators that moves you through the pavilion over this public space, looking down through the rail system that goes under it. Besides that, we have an RER, the freeway, a metro coming underneath. It's just, it's really wild. And then looking up at the tower as you're moving through the escalator, these glass tubes. And then, it's not the one I want. These are too small, it's not gonna work. But this kind of entry hall, you come through and kind of move through a gap, and you move to 2 levels immediately, and it takes the 10,000, breaks them down into 2 5,000 units. And then there's this leg that we just finished, and we're occupying it with a cafe. And again, when you work with these really extreme kind of idiosyncratic things, I just love this stuff. The cafe is on 2 levels down here, and it's gonna be like putting a cafe in the Hoover Dam. This goes up here, that's 35 meters. And this is gonna be the space of the cafe. It's gonna be just phenomenal. And it's just a found condition, and it came at the last minute. Again, one of these things that, again, I'm speaking to seasoned architects, the strategy also has to do with the flexibility required to work today. That we're changing things at the last minute, and you need something hugely flexible to do that, a methodology. And then this is kind of an early kind of start at a rendering of that space. And then again, the building is made up of a series of systems which we can articulate. And it's getting late now. I want to say a few more things before I end. But again, what I mentioned earlier, working with subcontractors, that we're so totally invested early on, really at schematic design, that the structure has, because of the nature of the structure, all the pieces are different. And so I've got people now scripting, organizing through scripts, and we're developing families. So we can now take those pieces down into 7 or 8 families and rationalize it so we can afford to build it. And then again, this one, in the nature of, they asked us to build an icon, and it was kind of an unusual project that way because they saw that, and that's why they had the competition. But at the same time, they wanted it performance-driven, and so these 2 things connect in this building. And now we took San Francisco, which was this, and we did this, where the shading system, the kind of performance system, goes east, south, west as the sun moves, and it's kind of just ramping it up. And then on top there's a wind farm, and it's going to be pretty extraordinary. There's that skin, and again, as we work out the kind of reality of the layers of skin, and now we're becoming much more sophisticated. We can look at the behavior of the heat on this over time, and so we can. Satoru, my scripter, there's 4,000 individual pieces of screen, and each of these has a date, and he can tell us exactly when they operate at the maximum performance, and we can proceed with the design of the project on that basis. It's just really amazing what's taking place. And again, we're looking at these interstitial spaces and the windmills on the top. And then finally, there's going to be a lighting system which talks about the nature of the form, and it was something that was purposely romantic, something purposely kind of soft, and it's going to emphasize kind of the shaping of the building and its relationship to the original tower. I have to show just one. Are you okay for 5 minutes? Gotcha? Because my little clock here says 1:01:03.